question. Which translation available now interprets the Yoga Sutras in the way closest to the mental rules?
Well, this is a real issue, and I will say that there are different translations that I like for different reasons. There is one that I love the translation. I love how it reads, and I love how it's presented. I just don't agree with it. Now, where do you place that? In fact,
which one's the?
This is what's his name? Michelle, I think you know this guy, Chip Hartranft. You know this guy?
Chip who?
Chip Hartranft. Okay, now here's a translation that I think is very inaccurate in many ways, and really doesn't really come together with my understanding of the jargon of oral tradition, which is very much connected with the actual language of Yoga Sutra. But he has made what I feel is his own very brilliant interpretation that I find very lovely to read, and I think it's very philosophically interesting, and I even find it interesting how he's translated some of the words. So I like it, but I don't find that it speaks to me of specifically of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And this is a problem that really that we have in finding a suitable translation, because I find the vast majority of translations are done in the last 75 years or so, and I believe that most of the translations are informed by a number of assumptions that we have already analyzed, and I think we all can be somewhat critical of some of these assumptions. So I'm sorry to say, Taylor, I really can't, if I come across a translation that blows me away, I will certainly inform all of you of that. But what you might do in the next week is take a look at what you have at hand, what seems to be interesting or good to you, and we can even go over some of the ways that things are translated that may or may not be interesting for you, but I'd be willing to take a few sutras, especially ones that you're more interested in, and we can look at, we can almost deconstruct the translation and the interpretation. You can't really deconstruct Patanjali or Panini, but you can deconstruct the way that we in the modern world translate and interpret Patanjali or Panini.
I had a question just about the asanas. Am I right in assuming that the asanas that you were referring to, Babaji, are asanas in your mouth, and that the comfort is in your mouth?
Okay. When I say, I've said in the past, I've used sort of the metaphor of asanas of the mouth. This isn't a real thing. This is a metaphor that I use. But I think when we discuss asana next week, we can look at asana in a very different way than even a posture. We can break it down really even more simple than the sitting. we can find in the use of this word, there's almost an indication of non-violence and non-activity itself in the word asana. But certainly, I just don't see how it could really be related to physical culture at all, especially the kind of physical culture that is employed in the modern yoga movement. If the modern yoga movement was referring to the Charak Samhita and the Ayurvedic aspect of Patanjali, it would make considerably more sense to me. If you take some looks at Yoga Sutra over the coming week, there's all sorts of things on internet that you can look at, or you can go out and buy a hard copy. I don't even think it really matters that much, as long as what is in your mind when you're reading this stuff is that you're not reading this for its information. You're reading this to see how somebody is presenting this information. And this is what is going to become interesting to us. Not that we're going through this person, this translator or interpreter, to reach Patanjali, but rather we can use this interpreter or translator to identify assumptions and kleshas that are creating hindrances for us in our own understanding, of this tradition of sacred speech, but much more important, in the understanding of who we are and how we access who we are.
Babaji?
Michelle?
That just, when you were talking about Satya and Himsa, what you just said is that I think a lot of people in the West look at a commentary, and instead of seeing it as a way, an indication of a lens that the commentator is seeing the world through, they take it as truth, as Satya.
Yeah. Well, this is putting everything into ideological terms. Moral and ideological terms, and as most of you know, is that I try and stay as far away from ideology as I can. And I think one of the big differences that you'll see in different interpretations, especially the way that in general I would interpret Patanjali as opposed to most of what you see on the marketplace, is that the marketplace is looking for an ideology to place Patanjali and Yoga Sutras within. That there is an ideology, something to believe in, something that the debates are ideological debates. And where I'm coming from, what I'm telling you, is that the debates are not ideological, that the debates are in terms of interpretation, and how the interpretation, the methodology of interpretation is relating to speech and language itself.
I have a question here which I typed out. I've been doing some reading on the roots, the stems in Sanskrit words, and I read the other day that the root for Satya is us, to be. I'm wondering if that kind of approach would help. Let's say, Satya I believe is derived from us, to be, to exist. The same, I'm wondering if something like asana is derived from us, just to be, like sitting down. to me suggests to be.
I
I'm
think,
trying to relate all these language rules and stems with getting a deeper kind of meaning to what is just in front of my face.
I think that
Does that make sense?
yeah, that does make sense to me. And I think that it informs you in a more general sense. I myself, I don't really like etymology. I think that etymology is very, very misleading. But having said that, it is also helpful in seeing where expressions may be coming from. In Sanskrit, to be an amateur etymologist is really, it can't possibly get us anywhere. And our amateur etymology is more based on assumptions that we carry with us, modern assumptions, rather than a means of really breaking through to an interpretation. So I tend to shy away from etymologies in that sense. In terms of European etymologies, I think it makes more sense, especially since we have so many different languages and we have stories and texts in different languages, and we want to know how they sort of connect with each other and relate to each other. And I think that etymology is considerably more useful in that sense. But to figure these things out ourselves, especially when the texts are composed by such such minds as Panini, Patanjali, Shankara, Madhvacharya, and so forth, it's almost a useless exercise. I get the feeling that the internet gods are starting to frown on us. So, I think I'll take this opportunity to wrap up for tonight, or daytime for you.
Oh, no.
And I'll see you all next week. And communicate with me during the week to the community page. Let me know your questions and comments so that we can go through the Yoga Sutras next week. Om Namo Narayana.